This is People in Power, Corporations on Trial. I'm Summer El-Shahat. This week, Juliana Ruhfus is on the dividing line.
We can't pass, but with their Belain identity card, Khatib and his mother can enter. This feels absolutely crazy. We're now walking on two sides of the separation fence.
Like many Palestinian villages in the occupied West Bank, Belain has been divided by Israel's so-called security wall, a fortified barrier that has cut people off from their own land and had a devastating effect on the fabric of their lives. To work their farms on the other side of the wall, Belain's residents must have permission from the Israeli military. And once there, they can only watch as illegal Israeli settlements spring up across their property. In 2006, as Palestinian and international protests grew, the Israeli Supreme Court ordered a halt to the building of these settlements and a rerouting of the wall away from Belain and other communities. But the verdict had little effect. So now the people of Belain have changed their tactics. In a landmark case, they filed charges not against the Israeli government, but against the construction companies who are putting up the settlements.
Every week, villagers of Belain in the Palestinian territory gather to demonstrate against the occupation of their land by Israeli settlers. Part concrete construction, part fenced road, the separation wall slices through Belain's lands, cutting the villagers off from their farms. On the other side, what were once ancestral olive groves is now a vast Israeli settlement. Mohammed Khatib organizes Belain's demonstrations. Every Friday, every week, for 4 years, he and hundreds of others have been protesting what they say is the theft of their land. Israeli and international supporters join in. Belain is famous for these non-violent protests.
What the demonstrators are trying to do is to get to the separation wall, to the fence. Whether they get there or not depends on whether the Israeli army starts to shoot tear gas, almost certainly, and possibly even live ammunition.
And without fail, it's the same confrontation, week in, week out. As the protesters approach the security wall, Israeli soldiers start to fire tear gas canisters into the crowd. Young Palestinian stone throwers retaliate, and the exchange escalates.
Today's demo was over really, really quickly because there was so much tear gas. Some of the more serious demonstrators are still here, but everybody else has just retreated.
Mohammed Khatib, too, is floored by the barrage of gas canisters. Despite the persistence of the protesters, all this suffering has been more or less in vain, because across the security wall, the construction still continues. A whole new swathe of Belain's land is currently being cleared to build a new Jewish settlement. But Belain has an ally, a lawyer who's taking the struggle from the contested olive groves into the courtroom, focusing on the private construction companies who are actually building the settlements.
According to international law, establishing settlements in an occupied territory is illegal. And I thought, well, why shouldn't Belain become the first Palestinian entity to challenge the construction of settlements? So I met with the people of Belain and I said, if you allow me, I will explore the possibility of litigation against those companies.
Wow.
It's dinner time in Mohammed Khatib's home. His 4 children, wife, mother and in-laws invite us to dinner. Khatib's family have become the plaintiffs in this court case. These olives come from the family's trees on the other side of the wall. Mohammed's mother explains how important olives are to their livelihood. Everyone in the family has been on the demonstrations. Abdullah here got shot, he says, with live ammunition. In the neighboring village, protesters have even lost their lives. But now the family, as plaintiffs in Safaad's legal case, have added a totally new dimension to their struggle: to stop private companies from legitimizing Israeli occupation.
Our argument in the case against the two companies is that they have been engaging in an activity which constitutes a war crime and a violation of international humanitarian law. If there is a price for being a collaborator of violation of international law, maybe other companies would think twice before they engage in such matters.
Ironically, the very next day, with the protests over, we can walk freely right up to the security wall. Mohammed Khatib and his mother have to negotiate every time they want to visit their land.
This land that we are sitting here, this is my motherland. This is our land. No, this gate is our gate.
Khatib asks the soldiers for permission to pass.
Just only the people of Belain can pass.
We can't pass, but with their Belain identity cards, Khatib and his mother can enter. They are only permitted to stay for 12 hours on their land. They have to return before nightfall. This feels absolutely crazy. We're now walking on two sides of the separation fence, wall, whatever you might want to call it. But we have to go all the way around, and we're going to meet them way back there in Modi'in Elite. We drove through neighboring Palestinian villages and the new Jewish settlement to meet up with them again.
Sorry, very long. Yeah, we were lost.
This is the land of their ancestors. Khatib says some of the olive trees are over 1,000 years old, tended by generations of his forebears. For now, the family still owns these groves, but he fears that any land on the Israeli side of the wall will soon be taken for development.
لحد الآن يعني متصور كيف مكان نزرعها ونبحث ونزرع فيها قمح وذرة وشعير وشو ما بكينا نزرع فيها. نكبة أنا وأمي وأخوتي وشلة هيتنا نبحث بالفاس ونكبة هناك هي لو الطريق واصل أوريك ليه لحد الآن في قلبي.
In spite of the Palestinian protests, the Jewish settlement of Modi'in Elite has become the largest Israeli settlement in the West Bank. And Michael Safaad, Belain's lawyer, says that international law is clear when it comes to settlement expansion.
And here we have the Fourth Geneva Convention, Article 49, and paragraph 6, which says the occupying power shall not deport or transfer parts of its own civilian population into the territory it occupies. And this is described in the Rome Statute, defined as a war crime. The violation of this principle, which is an established principle under international humanitarian law.
The international community considers the West Bank occupied territory since it was seized by Israel during the Six-Day War, violating the so-called Green Line, which had been internationally agreed in 1949 to separate Israel from the surrounding countries. When Defense Minister Moshe Dayan victoriously entered Old Jerusalem, Israel had laid claim to the entire territory up to the River Jordan, the West Bank. To understand the complicated geography at the heart of Belain's legal case, we are driving to the settlement of Modi'in Elite from the Israeli side of the wall. Nir Shalev, an Israeli planning expert and a long-term supporter of the people of Belain, takes us there.
And we are just about to cross the Green Line, the pre-67 borderline between Israel and Jordan, and we are on our way to the settlement of Modi'in Elite, which is completely beyond even the no man's land, in the West Bank proper, even according to the eyes of the Israeli authorities. Here is Modi'in Elite.
So then, basically what becomes really clear from this map is that Modi'in Elite is completely in Palestinian territory, in occupied territory.
There is no doubt about it.
Nia shows us the part of Modi'in Elite which is built on Belane's land. Blocks of flats, each designed to house 20 families. Green Park and Greenmount are the two key companies driving the most recent expansion of Modi'in Elite.
We had some luck because there were two companies that were constructing the neighborhood, which were Canadian companies. And when we've inspected the Canadian law at this issue, we found that Canadian law has been updated to include universal jurisdiction over war crimes and crimes against humanity. And so we contacted lawyers in Canada, and you know, the game was on.
If successful, Safat could win the villagers a symbolic $2 million compensation and maybe even the demolition of the new construction. Much like Belane's weekly protests, this court case is most of all about keeping the village and the wrongs committed against it in the news. But when you're paying Canadian lawyers, this doesn't come cheap.
The companies know that we are a poor village. Because of that, they are trying to ask for more documents, to ask for more questions that you have to answer, which means that there is more work. This means that more money. From where to, they thought that this thing will wreck us. Believe me, they cannot.
Modi'in Elite is an ultra-Orthodox town, home to around 41,000 ultra-Orthodox Jewish settlers. Many have come from Europe and the United States. There are small industries and thousands of jobs from a variety of employers, including some internationally known names. 50 children are born every week, and Modi'in Elite is forecast to reach a population of 150,000 by 2020. Modi'in Elite seems like a world of its own, but the presence of armed guards is an indication of the nearby struggle. This block of flats is home to Shraga and Yoshevet Boyer, who, like the majority of the settlers here, are a young married couple. How many children do you have in here? 4 children in this room. So you get the mattresses out in the evenings. They like living here with their 8 children, surrounded by their own. There is a heavy emphasis on religion. Only the women work. The men spend most of their days with religious studies. It sounds like it's the sort of place where you're very happy to stay. Would you say to other friends and family to come and move here?
The best.
The education is
the best. Naki, tov, ragua.
Belane's legal case doesn't seem to affect this young couple's life. Do you worry about the land dispute here?
זה לא קשור, לא, זה מקומות מסוימים, לא. וגם שם זה דברים לא רציניים, זה אנשים שמחפשים בלגן, זה לא דברים רציניים.
Okay, so in Modi'in Elite there is no land dispute, you think? Decisions about Modi'in Elite's ongoing development are taken in the local town council office. Yaakov Gutterman is not only the mayor of Modi'in Elite, but he also heads the regional planning department that grants permissions for the settlement's expansion. He says claims that Modi'in Elite is built illegally have no basis.
זו עיר שנבנתה, שקנו אותה לפני הרבה שנים, מפלסטינים מהאזור שעשו הרבה כסף. וזה גם היה, חלקם מהאדמות היו בבית משפט בראשותו של שופט ערבי, שהוא דן על בעלות הקרקעות, והוא אפילו פסק שזה בעלות יהודית, על זה אין ספק בכלל.
According to resolutions passed by the United Nations, settlements in the occupied territories are illegal. What is your response to that?
אני יודע דבר אחד, שלא יכול להיות חוק שמגביל זכויות לאדם שקנה נכס, שיגביל אותו בזכויות שלו. והחוק יגיד שלשני מותר לקחת כסף ולי אסור לממש את הנכס. לא שמעתי על כזה חוק.
But despite Gutterman's claims that the land has been bought, it has never been registered as privately owned in Israel.
You could argue that under international law, since you are involved with the process of giving planning permissions, you are potentially also guilty of war crimes.
זו שאלה פוליטית.
It's a political question.
What politics?
The conflict is a politician.
We wanted to put the same allegations to the owners of the Green Park and Green Mound companies, but it's hard to find out who that is. The Canadian lawyer says that information is confidential. Newspaper reports allege that a US-based Israeli businessman with offices here in Tel Aviv called Shaya Boimelgreen is behind them. Our attempts to talk to representatives of the companies were rebuffed. So instead, we went to see a lawyer who used to head up the International Law Department of the Israeli military, which is the authority in charge of the occupied territories. Daniel Reisner argues such cases should not go to court because Israel defines the West Bank not as occupied, but as disputed land.
The idea of the unlawfulness of the settlements is an ongoing dispute between Israel and many other countries. The official Israeli position has always been that the status of the West Bank, because of its unique historical chronology, is such that you cannot claim that it is officially occupied under international law. It's a very complicated historical narrative.
Belanes is not the only international case being taken against foreign corporations over alleged war crimes being committed in occupied Palestinian territory. This new light railway is the subject of a court case being brought in Paris against two giant European multinationals, the management and construction companies Alstom and Veolia. Shawan Jabarin is director of the Palestinian legal NGO Al-Haq, which was instrumental in bringing the case to the French courts.
Veolia, by constructing this light railway, it's for the benefit of the settlers and the settlements. And the settlements itself, it's illegal and it's in violation of the international humanitarian law. It's a grave breach, which means it's a war crime. And Veolia, by acting like that, they are also complicit on this kind of a crime.
Manaf Abbas, Jabrin's colleague at Al-Haq, is taking me along the route of the new light railway line. He shows me a map where Jewish settlements in occupied Palestinian territory are marked in purple. The tramline links settlements in the north of occupied East Jerusalem via Israeli West Jerusalem to another settlement on Palestinian land in the south.
If I then understand it right, the first step is that there are illegal settlements which are in all these areas, and the second step is to build a transport system that connects the illegal settlements with West Jerusalem.
That's right.
It is the sustaining of these Jewish settlements in occupied territory that the French court case argues is in breach of the Geneva Conventions. Al-Haq says by building settlements and the new transportation system, Israel is creating facts on the ground, a new status quo from which to negotiate a two-state solution.
There is no way to sue Veolia here inside Israel. The Israelis, they are violators. The Israelis, they are the occupying power. And completely they are ignoring their legal obligation under the international law. We have no justice here in this area. We have no real remedy in this area. We are looking for that outside of this country.
It is for this reason that the case was filed in Paris. In response, the company submitted a motion to dismiss it, arguing that it was outside the jurisdiction of the French courts. But on April the 15th, the plaintiffs won the first small victory when the Nanterre court ruled that it is competent to hear a case of this kind. Without doubt, this is a decision that will be carefully scrutinized in corporate boardrooms around the world and welcomed by campaigners in the hope that it can be used as a precedent.
We have requested interviews with both Veolia and Alstom,
Veolia declined to comment as the case is ongoing. Alstom referred us to previous press statements where they emphasized that they obtained the contract after open and international tender, and that as a private railway manufacturer they hold no political or diplomatic position. Now, both companies, Veolia and Alstom, are appealing the court's ruling. Back in Belaine, the struggle continues. This decree was found stuck on the security wall. It unilaterally announces the confiscation of another piece of Belaine's land by Israeli authorities. Basman Yassin says it's his, and he's furious.
After they are rebuilt their settlement, they are said to us, go to the court, and if it is yours, go to the court and prove that this land is yours.
By taking the Canadian construction companies to court, Belaine has found itself at the vanguard of testing international legislation.
So are you helping to set a precedent? Because if this has a positive outcome for your clients, it's going to have an effect way beyond the Israeli-Palestinian boundaries, I would imagine.
Definitely. And we're going for the full Monty. We're all in the business of setting straight what is responsibility for deeds under international law. You cannot escape responsibility for immoral and illegal actions just because you are committing those atrocities in a jurisdiction that allows it. You will be hunted in other places. That's our message.
But for Mohammed Khatib and his mother, it is the land that matters and the impact that international companies have on individual lives.
Our message to them, stop. And if you will continue, we will follow you in the court and we will cause you to lose. You cannot make money on the suffering of our life. So please, stop your crime in our land.
At a time when multinationals have influence which can even transcend the power of states, people like the Khatibs are at the forefront of a battle for more justice and accountability.
On April 17th, a month after Juliana was at the weekly anti-war demonstration in Bilen, Bassem Ibrahim Abu Rahma, a 30-year-old man from the village, was critically injured after being hit in the chest by an Israeli gas canister. He died on the way to hospital in Ramallah. That's it for this special edition of People and Power. In the next of our series on corporations on trial, Juliana Ruhfus is on the front line in the banana wars.
Colombia, 2009. As hundreds of graves are being opened, the truth of what happened during Colombia's dirty war is coming to light.
En el año 95 yo acabé confesado 70 muertes de sindicalistas en el solo año 95.
That's next week. In the meantime, if you'd like to comment on our report or any other matter, we'd love to hear from you on aljazeera.net/English. Until next time, bye-bye.